What's up, guys? My name is Jake. Welcome to Abandoned, episode 20. This, of course, is the show where we talk about some of the coolest abandoned places in the world. So, Walt Disney World. Most of you have been there, or at least heard of it. You may also know that surrounding the Magic Kingdom, there are Disney-themed resorts along the lake. What you may not know is that Disney had a lot more plans for their resorts than most people actually know about. These plans were eventually abandoned and still to this day have never been built. So I thought we should take a look at the abandoned plans for Disney's Magic Kingdom resorts. Way back in the late 60s, when Walt Disney World was in its extremely early planning, just about everything looked pretty different than we actually got now, except for the concept of Disney's Contemporary Resort. The reason why I won't include any of these is because later on, just a few years later, most of these things were changed, and finally later on we got the master plan, which included these three main resorts that we're going to talk about. These three resorts were Disney's Asian Resort, Disney's Venetian Resort, and Disney's Persian Resort. Now, I know these weren't the only planned hotels in the area that were eventually abandoned. Disney's Polynesian Resort looked pretty different than what we actually got. And when Walt Disney World was actually being built, you can see land being cleared for something called Cypress Point Lodge. This later on became the concept for Disney's Wilderness Lodge, and then obviously Disney's Wilderness Lodge was built a few years later. It was a whole thing, alright? Now, if you're not entirely familiar with the layout and geography of Disney World's Magic Kingdom area, because why would you be, I'll give you a quick rundown. So everyone knows the Magic Kingdom Park, and that it's built on the shore of a lake, Seven Seas Lagoon to be exact. In the Magic Kingdom area, there are two lakes that connect to each other. One is called Bay Lake, which is a natural lake in Florida, and the other is called Seven Seas Lagoon, which was actually man-made by Disney. All of the immediate resorts are on the shores of these two lakes. The monorail for the Magic Kingdom circles around Seven Seas Lagoon and stops at all of its resorts. Now, to give you a point of reference, this is where the Magic Kingdom Park is, and if you've actually watched our other abandoned videos, you may remember River Country and Discovery Island. So now you know the basics of what the layout of the Magic Kingdom area looks like. I promise this is important. Anyways, let's talk about the resorts themselves. So way back in 1970, Disney opened the Walt Disney World Preview Center, which gave people a real finalized version of what the new resort would look like. The preview showed the resort's 5-year master plan and what was to come after the grand opening. On October 1st, 1971, the entire resort opened to the public with the Magic Kingdom, Disney's Polynesian Resort, and Disney's Contemporary Resort, and soon after with Disney's Fort Wilderness Campground. So as the main hotels and resorts were in for Phase 1, it was time to move along with the next phase of hotels. So I guess now we should talk a little bit about each of the three hotels, and I'll start with Disney's Asian Resort.
Perhaps lunch on the way at the new Disney-designed and Disney-managed Asian Hotel.
Now, this hotel was one of the closest ones to be actually built. At the time the park opened, the Asian Resort was slated to open in 1974, and with the land cleared and ready for construction. This hotel was so far along that the road adjacent to the property was actually called Asian Way. The Thailand-themed resort was to house over 500 rooms and featured a pretty spectacular lobby. In addition, since it was placed alongside the monorail line, it would also feature a monorail station. This resort was very, very close to actually becoming reality, as the proper blueprints were actually drawn up and the site tested multiple times. In Disney's 1972 annual report, the company claimed that their two existing hotels were at a steady 100% occupancy, and that the company would begin architectural work on the new Asian-themed hotel. Across Seven Seas Lagoon, in between the Contemporary and the Transportation and Ticket Center, would lay Disney's Venetian Resort.
All of these new hotels will be managed and run as a working part of Walt Disney World. This one is a bit of Venice and St. Mark's Square. Venetian throughout in design and decor.
Not a looker, but it did have some interesting things about it. After its Venice inspiration, the hotel would feature its own enclosed harbor and small waterways in which guests would actually be able to ride in gondolas around the resort. A 120-foot scale replica of the Campanelli at St. Mark's Square would be constructed as the resort's main focal point, and the main building would have an open lobby with the majority of the roof being glass. Lastly, we have Disney's Persian Resort. Located just to the east of the Magic Kingdom Park, I think this one, honestly, is probably the most interesting.
This one will be a vision out of the Arabian Nights, the Persian Hotel, a veritable palace of the hotel keeper's art.
This hotel was the only one to be placed on Bay Lake, too. The resort would feature a massive 24-foot dome in the middle in which the lobby, shops, and restaurants would all reside. The hotel would feature some really amazing architectural work, which looks really impressive, especially for the time it was developed in. From the center building, guest buildings would surround the main structure. With this unique design, guest rooms would actually be right on the controlled water, which would allow guests to practically even sail up to their own rooms from the lake, which is kind of cool. Now, this hotel did something very interesting with the monorail. Even though the hotel is placed off the monorail loop, the hotel would actually feature a monorail stop. Instead of going straight from the Contemporary to the Magic Kingdom station, the monorail would actually stop at the Persian and actually go through Tomorrowland all the way back to the Magic Kingdom station. Now, technically the monorail line was constructed, however it was never built to actually go through the Magic Kingdom park, and it's being used as a service line to the monorail maintenance building. So all of these hotels sound pretty great actually, don't they? So what really happened with everything? Well, like I said before, following the Magic Kingdom's opening, things were actually going pretty well, and their main two hotels were filling up pretty quickly. And honestly, the demand for a more deluxe resorts were kinda there. And with this, in 1972, all three hotels were considered to be greenlit projects. However, the following year, in 1973, the oil and energy crisis took its toll on basically all of tourism, and this included Walt Disney World. Attendance for the park dropped off around 20%, which took a hard hit on Disney's hotels. So with all of this happening, Disney made the reasonable decision to opt for a much cheaper hotel to build. One that would be placed in Disney's Palm and Magnolia golf courses called the Golf Resort, which would later on be named the Disney Inn in 1986. Unless you actually stayed there yourself, a lot of you may not know this actually exists. And that's probably because it was purchased by the United States government in 1996 exclusively for military personnel. Anyways, following the opening of the golf resort, nothing was really ever said about the other hotels. Then the development of Epcot Center began in 1974, which really put a halt to all on-property resorts until they were absolutely needed. And later on, the financial mess of Epcot really didn't help with the need of these resorts. And at this point, all three hotels were put on hold until the company believed it would be a safe investment. You have to remember too that the Disney company was struggling, and they really didn't have the money to throw at a massive new deluxe resort, especially with Epcot costing so much to build. So with all three resorts shelved, and Michael Eisner fixing Disney as their new CEO, what ended up happening to all these resorts and their land? Well, with Epcot now earning steady attendance numbers, and with Disney's MGM Studios being announced, Disney was ready to build a new resort. However, oddly enough at the time, around 1986, all advertisements and signage for the Asian resort disappeared. That abrupt massive square in Seven Seas Lagoon now seemed completely useless. This was until the late 80s when Disney announced they would be building a Floridian-style resort, which was a pretty different idea from the previous one. Apparently, Michael Eisner just didn't like the idea of building a Thailand-themed resort, and wanted something grand and elegant, and something that would pay tribute to the old-time turn-of-the-century hotels. The land for the Asian resort would now be used for this brand new hotel. So with that specific land being vacant on Seven Seas Lagoon for over 17 years, in 1988, Disney's Grand Floridian Resort opened to the public. It was Disney's first on-property hotel since 1973. So after a few years pass, Disney's MGM Studios are now open, and Walt Disney World's attendance numbers are skyrocketing. And with this, Michael Eisner wanted to once again expand with another deluxe hotel. So what better place to look than the old Venetian Resort plans? Well, at least for the land of the Venetian. Michael Eisner assigned Imagineers to come up with a concept for a brand new hotel that would be placed on that prime real estate. What they came up with was actually pretty cool. The new resort was to be called Disney's Mediterranean Resort, and it was a pretty interesting take on ancient Greek architecture mixed with some modern elements. The smaller resort was to be an ultra-premium deluxe resort that would rival the Floridian. The land began to be cleared in the mid to late 90s, only to find one big problem. See, the land that the resort was to be built on was extremely poor. Ground tests reportedly kept showing that the land could just not be used for such a massive structure. Allegedly, the pylons for the hotel's foundation would have been deeper than those used for Spaceship Earth, which would have been unbelievably expensive. So with this news, the hotel was just simply cancelled and trees were replanted on its site. Now apparently Disney does keep a close eye on new construction techniques, and every few years Disney does go back and perform some ground tests, as they probably are still really interested in that land. Finally, as for the Persian Resort, well, not much actually really happened with that. Allegedly, this resort came the closest to being built, as it was offered to be completely funded and staffed back in 1978. Now in the beginning, when the Magic Kingdom was actually being constructed in the early 70s, the land was actually cleared out on where the Persian Resort would have been. Now my best guess is that the land was actually being used for construction crews when building the park. So I'm sure Disney thought, well, we're gonna put a hotel there in a few years, so we might as well clear out the land and put stuff there. And actually, ever since that point, the land has actually stayed completely clear, presumably for the Persian Resort at some point. But in recent years, since the land is so close to the backstage areas, the land's actually being used for parking areas and sometimes even like a massive storage facility. Once you're past the Contemporary, the road system becomes very odd and kind of confusing, so the placement of the land there being essentially backstage and out of the way from everything else makes it kind of inconvenient. However, it would be awesome to see a change in the monorail line, perhaps even running through the park itself like they previously had planned. So will anything ever happen with the 3 original hotel ideas and the 2 remaining plots of land? Well, as for the ideas and plans for the resorts, those seem to be permanently shelved. Now to be fair, those plans were drawn up 46 years ago, and the logistics of building anything remotely similar to them are kind of slim. Now that doesn't mean the ideas behind those resorts are gone forever. It's entirely possible that we may see something Asian inspired, say, one day. I honestly think the Mediterranean resort would be the most realistic one to be built. And even some elements from the Venetian Resort and the Asian Resort have been already implemented in places like Epcot already. But as for the other 2 plots of land that remain unused, I have a feeling that the Persian one is going to remain a service, parking, and storage area for a while. I think just because of its location, it's pretty unrealistic that they would build a massive resort so close to backstage areas. I've actually seen a lot of rumors suggesting that there might actually be something there, and that Disney's just really hesitant about doing something there. The only problem with that is obviously the location, plus they would need to do a lot of infrastructure reworking, which would just add to the massive cost for the resort. However, I have heard that Disney has been giving this spot a hard look at for a while, and maybe there may be something there at some point. And honestly, I think that would be pretty cool. As for the Venetian/Mediterranean land, well, that land will probably be used as soon as it can be. I'm sure as soon as that land becomes safe to build on, Disney would jump on that opportunity in a heartbeat. Perhaps even something along the lines of a Mediterranean resort that they were planning before. Honestly though, I really think we realistically can see something in the future happening either in the Persian area or the Venetian area. But hey, I mean, early master plans show that Disney was at some point planning on an expansion to Seven Seas Lagoon, which would be very interesting to see. And actually kind of makes sense since you can add more hotels with lake views. I wonder what the costs are for extending a man-made lake. Probably a lot. Anyway guys, my name is Jake. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat, and thank you very much for watching.